All right. I'm never good at starting off these types of videos, but I figured, given that I've been someone that is known for some hot button opinions on things in the amateur scene, that I would kind of give my perspective on what's going on with the whole Sola Fide drama right now. Um, I wouldn't really call it full drama, but I do want to give a little bit of perspective. So if you haven't seen where this all started, the tweet, etc., I'm going to link it down below um, on Twitter and on YouTube, etc. But I kind of want to take my thought process and give a brief overview. So yesterday, Solo Fide played No Org, and they 2-0'd No Org. Admittedly, the 2-0 scoreline doesn't really reflect how Game 2 was, and even Game 1 was close for a little bit, but they did 2-0. And the clip that's floating around that the owner of Sola Fide posted is of the caster TJ um, saying that it's his pleasure to tell fans that Sola Fide has been struggling throughout the proving grounds circuit to beat amateur teams. And it's taken out of context, but I don't really want to take like a dissection of the clip or even talk about caster bias, quote unquote, because I've been one to call out caster bias and flaws I see as well. I think there is caster bias in some instances. I want to talk about narrative though, and how we approach narratives and how we approach how casters present narratives. I'm not going to say that the cast was perfect or that there weren't flaws, but I think we have to kind of put a perspective on it because a lot of people are, you know, saying, it's been the same narrative for Soul Fide the whole way through. You've just been bashing on them, all that sort of stuff. And I don't agree with that at all. So I kind of want to give a perspective on how I view Soul Fide's journey so far. So starting off with the first tournament before Proving Grounds, the Cup, pre-Proving Grounds tournament. Soul Fide was in it, but they were under a different name. They were in as Not Academy. And so they came in as Not Academy and kind of made a joke off of the fact that they weren't Academy players when their whole roster has been Academy or LCS and has played on the LCS stage, with Zazel even being a world semifinalist. Like, everybody kind of sees these players, recognizes their names, like, why aren't they in Academy at the very least, let alone LCS? They're good enough to be there. So they were kind of playing off that joke in the first place, anyways. And we'll talk a little bit more about their own players' perceptions of their team and all this sort of stuff. But going into that tournament, everybody has the expectations of, we know these players, we know what they can do, we know what they're capable of. We're expecting them to be at the top. We're expecting them to kind of be untouchable in a sense. And so, that tournament happens, and then they get picked up by Solo Fide. I don't really want to talk about the results of the tournament because it's a preseason tournament. I don't think there's really anything to break down there other than the fact that they came in under the name Not Academy as kind of a joke when they were that caliber of a roster. Getting into the first Tier 2 tournament, Risen, I think the narrative that was given out by the casters, and mind you, a lot of these tournaments have had the same casting core and have had a lot of overlap. So a lot of these narratives have been consistently being talked about by them. But the narrative was, can any of these amateur teams compete with Solafide? I mean, this is, again, a team that's at the very least at an academy level based on the players that they're fielding. They've got an org behind them that's paying them. They've got a good coach. This is a team that should be just dominating all of amateur in theory, based on the players that they have, right? So, can any amateur team compete with them? They're the clear favorites. We're expecting them to win it all and expecting them to be the dominant favorites in almost every matchup. So, can teams even compete, right? That's the narrative that we're spinning. These are this is basically, we have an academy team in amateur. Is there still a gap between academy and amateur? Is there still like kind of that untouchable area that amateur just can't traverse right now? That was where we were at. And as we got to playoffs, okay, Solafide had been beat by Wildcard, which was a shock, but some people counted it out as luck. Some people counted it out as an off day. Uh, Whatever. Um, but they did get beat, and then they came back through in semis. They, in a best of five, they went 5 games with Barrage, I believe. I might get my names mixed up. My memory is very hazy. Um, but they went 5 games in semis, and people were like, okay, amateur teams can compete. And then they went to finals, and they went 5 games there as well. Now they won both of those 5 game series, but they were pushed and they were challenged, and people are starting to see, okay, well, the people that are supposed to be the gods of amateur this season, of proving grounds, this academy team, can bleed. And I, even after that event, the players on Sola Fide said, hey, we're not happy with our performance. We expect ourselves to be on a different level. Uh, that's the expectation we have of ourselves. They've said that in interviews. And this is a team that has access to academy level scrims. They're admitted in interviews. Dokla admitted in the big interview that they scrim academy rosters. So this is a team that has high expectations of itself to be better than everybody in amateur, and that's the narrative that was pushed. So as we went into big, now big had its own problems, but now the narrative is, okay, so the gods can bleed, but can they be beaten? Can someone take a tournament off them? Can they be, knocked out in a sense? And in big, they did not perform. They did not perform well in big. They did not make top two in big. And they were shown that they were beatable. They weren't gods. They weren't, gapping everybody. And so now the narrative is, we've painted the picture. We've got gods. And now Risen, can gods bleed? We've said gods can bleed. Can be gods be beaten? Can they be, cut off at the knees? Can they be beaten? Can someone get to that level? Well, now we have that answer of yes. So now the script changes because we're going into our third tournament. We go into the Cup Tier 2 tournament, and we're looking at it of, okay, this Sola Fide team is a team that hasn't performed to the expectations that we had for them at the start of the season based on the players that they have and their own expectations as players that they've stated in interviews. They have the resources, they have the players, and they have academy level scrims, so we're expecting enough out of them. But when I say they've underperformed, they have struggled. They've been pushed to 5 games multiple times in the first tournament. They got knocked out of the second tournament and lost to teams that no one would think that they should lose to. And then they go into Cup and they don't win that either. They get knocked out, admittedly, by good teams that have grown and have gotten better with some veterans as well. But every step of the way, they have failed expectations. The expectation was your God tier, prove it. And narrative was confirmed, gods can bleed. Can gods be beaten though? Narrative confirmed, gods can be beaten. New narrative, this is a team that's underperforming. We want to see something out of them before we hit the tier ones, and we don't see something out of them. So now we come into tier ones and we say they've performed in some of their matches, but this is a team that has consistently underperformed through all of tier two. If I'm coming in, I'm looking at it as, is this where they step up? Is this where Soul Fide, you know, says, hey, we're the best team in amateur right now? Yeah, they locked their spot in proving grounds. That's, besides the point. Winning these tier ones, this tier one is proving, hey, we're the best team in amateur right now. We've beaten academy teams. We're beating every top amateur team. We are the best team in amateur going into proving grounds. And I think TJ painting it as, I'm excited that they've struggled in amateur, is a good thing. The reason I say this is because that's the narrative we're going to paint anyways, that they've underperformed and that they need to step up. And is this where they step up to really prove themselves? But beyond that, it helps paint the picture of, if this academy level roster, this roster that has literal world semifinalists on it, players that have played in the LCS, that have succeeded in the LCS, that have played at the highest level in America and are supposed to be on just another level from amateur, that are supposed to be like, there's supposed to be a gap, when amateur teams can take games off them, when amateur teams can beat them, can make them struggle, can show that they aren't untouchable, we're looking at a situation where that makes amateur look better, because it shows that the gap between academy and amateur is closing. It shows that, yeah, these players are good, but there are amateur players that are just as good, if not potentially better, that can compete with them. There is potential. There is rosters and players that haven't been given an opportunity, that are beating the players that have succeeded on the world stage, that are beating the players that have had opportunities above them. It shows how far amateur is coming and how much talent there is in amateur. And yes, it comes at the expense of this org, of these players. That's not to say Sola Fide didn't win the game. That's not to say Sola Fide didn't play a good game, or that they haven't performed in this tournament. They absolutely have, and there were many points during TJ Nibria's broadcast where they mentioned that, and they pointed that out, and they praised that. But when you're the veterans, when you're painting yourselves as the bad guy the entire series, like the entire proving grounds, which they have, it's a different story. You are the bar. You are the litmus test. Yeah, there were academy teams in this game, but you beat those academy teams. You're supposed to be basically a pro level roster, and teams are beating you. And you underperforming is the litmus test for how good is amateur actually. How much potential is actually there. That's what comes with veteran status. If, you know, Golden Guardians comes in with 5 rookies and they play TSM with 5 veterans, and they win and they take games off of them, that looks good on the talent development, because it means that the veterans aren't just bullying everybody around. It means that the talent is there to continue pushing the scene forward and to continue pushing these veterans to be better. It's just good for everything. And that's what comes with being the veteran. You're the litmus test. That's what comes with Faker versus Closer in the LCK right now. How good is Closer? Well, is he better than Faker? Is he better than the best player to ever play the game? We don't know. We have to see how he performs, but we're comparing him to Faker for a reason. We're comparing amateur players to Sola Fide for a reason. I think the narrative is perfect, and I think to call it caster bias without offering actual constructive criticism and feedback is flawed, and honestly just looks like you want to play the victim, when in reality you don't know how to actually brand your players, because Sola Fide doesn't brand their players, um, which I think is, sad, because they have great players, but they could be branding them a lot more, and it just reflects poorly on your org. I hate to be that person, but it does. You don't look professional. You don't look, um, well, I guess professional is the only word for it. You don't look good, and that's just the facts of the matter to me. There's nothing wrong with the narrative. You're just playing the victim, and it's honestly sad that we're having this conversation, and that TJ and Nibria have to deal with this hate directed towards them when they did nothing wrong, in my opinion. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching if you stuck around through all of it. And yeah, peace.